Harry's Wife, Part 102.20.1. Plagiarism. Korean spa story. There are many upsides to being famous. Lots of people know you and invariably adore you. Whether this might be having knickers thrown at you when you're on stage, to people handing you flowers, sending you gifts, screaming and cheering when you appear, through to, of course, being given access to things that mere mortals ordinarily are denied. The best seats at the theatre, prominent position in hard-to-get reservations at restaurants. Patrick Bateman would be most envious of those more famous, able to get reservations at Dorsia so readily. The fact, of course, that you become a household name, that designers, advertisers, manufacturers are wanting you to advertise and promote their products which they provide to you for free. You become the face of a particular product or service, well remunerated for it too, and of course, with fame invariably comes money, and in some instances, vast wealth. Thus, there are many upsides, and it's no surprise, of course, that so many of my kind, the narcissists, are drawn to seeking fame, because it caters so brilliantly to the prime aims of fuel, control, character traits, and residual benefits. However, there are certain downsides, and one is that when you're famous, lots of people know about you, meaning that there's an army of fact-checkers sitting, observing, waiting, correlating, comparing, remembering. That isn't a problem if you don't go around telling porky pies lies. But if, like many narcissists do, you come out with these outlandish claims, the revisions of history, and the lies, there's a considerable risk, particularly if you're not a highly evolved narcissist, i.e., you're of the lesser or mid-range variety, that you end up, quite simply, getting caught out. And it would appear that this has once again happened to Harry's wife. Now, just as an aside, I often talk about less evolved and more evolved narcissists. To ensure people fully understand, when I refer to somebody as being a narcissist, that means that they are fully a narcissist. They're not half a narcissist, they're not a partial narcissist, they are a narcissist. And as a fully formed narcissist, I categorize between lesser, mid-range, greater, and ultra. And there are subschools for lesser, mid-range, and greater. It doesn't mean that if someone's a lesser narcissist that they're only partially a narcissist, or if they're mid-range, they've only halfway become a narcissist. It seems to me, in occasional comments, some people are labouring under a misapprehension there. If you're a lesser narcissist, you're a total narcissist, but of a lesser variety. If you're a mid-range narcissist, you're a total narcissist, but of the mid-range classification. If you're a greater narcissist, you're a total narcissist, but of the greater description. And there are similarities between those three main schools and differences. But understand, whether lesser, mid-range, or greater or ultra, all of those categories are fully formed narcissists. When I talk about the evolution, more evolved narcissists are more skilled, more difficult to catch out, more difficult to have their control threatened, and deal with threats to control far more effectively. Their facades more or less remain intact all of the time. Lesser and mid-range, their narcissism isn't as well evolved, so there are cracks in the facade for the mid-rangers. There are flashes of heated fury seen with the lessers, often in a sustained way. Basically, their narcissism isn't as effective at keeping things in order in the way that a greater does. And I thought it was important to make that distinction to help people's understanding. Now, let us return, of course, to Archetypes episode 4, where Harry's wife told us all about her Korean spa adventure. Let's revisit it. It was right at the very beginning, in order to ensure that we know fully what she said. Growing up in Los Angeles, these are the types of foods I would eat. Tamales, gourmet sabzi, larb, matzo ball soup, adobo, along with your usual kid fare of chicken nuggets and fries and burgers and pizza. And the types of languages I would hear, honestly, more than you can imagine, from Armenian to Farsi, Korean, Spanish, Hebrew. Los Angeles, despite how segregated it sometimes felt, was full of culture that you could see, feel, hear, and taste on a daily basis. The multitude of Asian cultures was a huge part of that for me. My weekends were spent in Little Tokyo, or having iced teas in Thai Town, or sitting with my friend Christina Wong, if she exists, and her parents at a local Chinese restaurant. I remember this so vividly, and them teaching me why chow fun with dry noodles was so much better than chow fun with wet noodles. Now, obviously, I had a real fixation with food, not much has changed there, but more than that, I had a real love of getting to know other cultures, apart from the British one, and part of that, my mum and I would often go to the Korean spa together. Now, those of you who haven't been to one before, it's a very humbling experience for a girl going through puberty, because you enter a room with women from ages 9 to maybe 90, all walking around naked and waiting to get a body scrub on one of the tables lined up in a row. All I wanted was a bathing suit, but you're not allowed, by the way. And once I was over that adolescent embarrassment, my mum and we would go upstairs. We would sit in the room upstairs having a steaming bowl of the most delicious noodles, and we'd look around at all these other women, these beautiful Korean women who had embraced the generational tradition of the jjimjilbang and shared it with one another. Now that was part of the Asian American culture that I knew. I hadn't known all the stigmas and archetypes that so many women of Asian descent specifically had faced until many, many years later. So, she tells us in clear detail about her repeated attendance at the Korean spa. However, because of her infamy, and so many people, she would say, have it in for her, there is this legion of scrutineers, of fact-checkers, and, of course, as I mentioned in parts passing, this immediate tale had a lack of authenticity about it, to use one of Harry's wife's favourite words. First of all, we thought that she spent most of her adolescent years living with Thomas Markle, because wasn't she going to the set of Married with Children or General Hospital or whatever it was that he worked on, and she would be sat there as a little Catholic schoolgirl, and that was where she would hang out, and that she lived with him because Doria disappeared, so far unexplained, leading to many people to think that she was possibly in jail. But during this period of her life, she lived with Thomas and Doria was not on the scene. Therefore, how could she regularly go to a Korean spa with her mother? Furthermore, she had portrayed herself as being the Duchess of Sizzler, and that she was only able to afford eating the salads there, and that she had a poor upbringing. This, of course, is at odds with the cost of going to a Korean spa regularly and eating there. Naturally, many people called bullshit when they read the transcripts or had seen reports of this, or indeed had the misfortune to actually listen to the podcast in question. And so it would appear that not only is the veracity of this excursion called into question for the reasons that I've just explained, but it gets even more interesting, because there's a suggestion that she has plagiarized this experience from a cartoon show. Screen Rant tells us about a show called Big Mouth and provides an article of 10 times the show was relatable. Now, I've never heard of this show, and I suspect it's an American show. The article by Kaylina Pierce Bowen, which was published 3 years ago, explains about Big Mouth being a show about the humorous agony of puberty. Big Mouth recalls a bunch of adolescents' greatest hits, from hormones to sexuality. Big Mouth recaptures all of the horror and hilarity of puberty in animated form, allowing it to be as obscene and awkward as possible. Following preteen Andrew Gluberman and his friends as they navigate adolescence in their own bodies, the Netflix original series showcases all the traumatic and tantalizing ways that puberty affects boys and girls. To spice things up, the series created hormone monsters, furry manifestations of puberty's driving forces that instigate the kids to give in to their hormonal urges. It's precisely because the show is so relatable that even though its dark humour isn't for everyone, it's gained fans with each passing season. It's explored everything from first periods to first boners, and in doing so, it's also created language to help prepubescent kids explain what they're going through. Now, when puberty rears its ugly head, they can say, "The hormone monster made me do it." By doing so, it reminds us that while the process is painful at times, we were all in it at one point together. It then goes on to provide 10 instances the show was relatable, and, at number 8, Mrs. Body Image. Of all her peers, the article explains, Missy is one of the most well-adjusted. She's been brought up in an open-minded, free-thinking, mixed-race household. So far, so familiar, with a mother who has always endeavoured to make her feel beautiful exactly how she is. But the Mirror has different ideas for Missy in Season 2. And who hasn't, despite their better judgment, hated the way they look at one time or another. Missy becomes her own worst enemy, declaring that no one will ever be attracted to her because her body is so ugly. No similarity there with Harry's wife. Her delusion is such that she believes that she's stunning. Sensing her hostility, her mum invites her and Jessie to a Korean spa to take a look at dozens of other naked women and celebrate what makes them all look uniquely beautiful. And the episode itself indeed has mother stripping off naked in front of her embarrassed daughter in order to celebrate the other naked women there. Thus, biracial girl, Korean spa, taken there with her mother. Sounds oddly familiar, doesn't it? Well, you may well think so, and so do plenty of other people. Because, and let us dive into the always interesting Reddit thread, which is called St. Harry's Wife. They use her actual name, as you know, I don't say it. And there, Eugene Parmesan Private declares she copied the Korean story. MM is a compulsive liar. And there is an excerpt from Harry's grey suit from Twitter, who has retweeted something from Meghan's mole on Twitter, which provides the excerpt from Mrs. Body Image, which I've just read to you. Thus, it appears that Harry's wife has been rumbled by those keeping an eye out for such matters. But what do the Redditors have to say? Well, Correct Piglet 7636 observes, she's just crazy. There's no way she did that with her mum. I thought they had no relationship when she was younger. Plus, what happened to her ethnic experiences, having to dine at Sizzler to save money? She's got so many ongoing lies, I don't know how she keeps track. I call bullshit. Dutchy01 responds, to be fair, the Sizzler story made her relatable because those other kids could not afford anything else. She never said she herself could not afford anything else, just that even then, Megs was humble and thankful, even for a $4.99 salad bar. Humble Tangerine 328 provides further observations. Dear Lord. Speaking of her plagiarising sitcoms, I was watching Blackish the other day, and Bao did a whole episode on being mixed race. I think this was season 2 or 3, which aired in 2015-16 respectively. And there was a specific scene where she was sat in a classroom as a child and didn't know what ethnicity to select on the questionnaire, so she created her own box. Sound familiar? This woman, honestly, I don't understand how the mainstream media doesn't pick up on this stuff. Not watch Squid Game declares, imagine acting like you understand Asian culture because you use commodified services like a spa and bought noodles. That would be like me saying I've been in yoga classes, so I know all about Indian spirituality. Very useful observation, that. Not watch Squid Game. Jean Parmesan Private, the original poster, states she is a compulsive liar. She needs a padded room and a psychiatrist. And Ms. Puffins comments, quite accurately, she's not lying. It's her truth, which indeed is correct. She is lying when seen by everybody else, but in her world, it's the truth because her narcissism causes her to do this. Thus, it would appear that she has been plagiarising. Jim Glidewell observes, I love that it takes only a day or so for yet another one of her lies to be exposed. Lord knows that the internet and social media are at times a mixed blessing, but exposing malignant frauds is a big plus. Lying cult leaders, be they religious or otherwise, simply can't count on lies being left unexposed. Jean Palmerston Private says, where is that fact-checker she hired? I bet the fact-checker is dodging dishes at the Olive Garden today. Ready Maddie reports, I agree, but what's the point? We expose her, we make noise on social media with receipts, and nobody listens to us. We're deemed haters and racist. There's no way to bring this idiot down. Well, you should understand, Ready Maddie, that the likes of me utilise material that you all find, and I give it further prominence through my YouTube channel alongside the dissection and analysis vis-a-vis her narcissism. Thus, more and more people get to hear about it. And if you haven't accessed my videos already, Ready Maddie, I'd invite you to do so you can understand that Harry's wife is on a downward spiral, you'll understand where it all ends up, and you'll also understand that she's her own worst enemy and where that will lead to. Thus, it appears that Harry's wife has pinched, purloined, stolen the narrative from a Netflix Over the Irony show and utilised it for herself, of passing off as one of her own experiences and explaining it on her Spotify broadcast. One wonders what Spotify would make of this, presumably too embarrassed to respond to it and would brush it under the table by just saying coincidence, even if they were to acknowledge it. But this raises this question. Why does Harry's wife do this? Well, unsurprisingly, it's driven by her narcissism. She has a rampant sense of entitlement. She's allowed to do what she wants. You're not allowed to say no to her. She's allowed to go where she pleases, speak with whom she chooses, do what she wants. And if that means taking your experiences and passing them off as her own, then she can do so. It's character trait acquisition, one of the prime aims. She also has no sense of accountability for her behaviour. Therefore, nothing is deemed wrong in behaving in this fashion. She has no emotional empathy for how it makes people feel. For instance, somebody who has spent time thinking through these narratives only for someone to pinch them and pass them off as their own. And also for other people who might believe what she said only to find out, oh, so that didn't actually happen. I feel conned. Furthermore, she has no boundary recognition. What's yours is hers. What is his is hers. What is hers over there is Harry's wife. She doesn't recognise any boundary, and therefore it's acceptable for her to conduct herself in this manner. It's grandiose of her to make the assumption that people would not recognise that this has been taken from elsewhere. She does it because there's simply nothing there. She's empty. And as a consequence of that, her narcissism has to go through life taking sections and shards and fragments and bits from other people in terms of what they are, what they've achieved, where they've been, what they've done. It might be her watching a television program. It might be having a conversation with a friend. It might be something that she's read in a book. It might be something off a television advert. Think about Catherine Zeta-Jones climbing out of the back of the car. In some instances, she takes the experience and bolts it on completely unchanged. In other instances, she will take it and perhaps make some kind of adjustment to it. In her world, the narcissism convinces her that it was her own experience. Bizarre as it may seem, that she acquires this, and then her narcissism causes her to believe that it is her own legitimate experience. She doesn't sit down and do this. Right, I'm doing a podcast about Asian stereotypes, or archetypes as she would say it, because she doesn't understand the English language at times. What I need is some good experience from my past to make it look like I understand Asian culture. So what could I do? I know. I once watched this episode of Big Mouth, and the mother took the girl and went to the Korean spa. I'll use that. Yeah, I'll use that, and that'll legitimize my Asianness. It doesn't work like that. Quite simply, she will have seen this at some point. And then, at a later juncture, when her narcissism needs to assert control through this podcast, it pulls up this memory of going to a Korean spa, but it makes her believe that it was her own experience. It doesn't go, hey, Harry's wife, remember when you saw that program about the Korean spa? Why don't you claim that you went there? Nobody will know. Instead, the narcissism effectively does this. Right about that time you went to the Korean spa, and as the biracial daughter of a black lady, and remember how humble you felt and embarrassed you felt, and your mum stripped off and you had to strip off, and you looked at all of those naked ladies? Yes, I remember all of that. And thus it enters the podcast. Her narcissism causes her, as she cruises through life, she vacuums in these experiences, these fragments and shards and slivers and segments of other people's lives, and bolts them onto the construct, which is her false self. And that construct is there to be outward-facing, to assert control, to draw fuel, to commandeer those residual benefits. So the character traits are part of the prime aims, and they assist in the achievement of other prime aims. And if you haven't done so already, I would urge you to watch my video about character trait acquisition to understand more about this, and to understand why Harry's wife repeatedly plagiarizes. She's empty. She doesn't have many of these experiences. She's the Duchess of Industrial Beige. She's actually a very boring individual. And in order to make her seem far more interesting, so that she can assert control over people and draw fuel from them and gain residual benefits from them, her narcissism has to extract the characteristics, personality, experience, achievements, memories, history of other people, of programs, of other items, and make her believe that it belongs to her. And thus, governed by that sense of entitlement, lack of accountability, lack of boundary recognition, absence of emotional empathy, she repeatedly engages in putting out there material as if it were her own. And now you understand, not only did the story about the Korean spa lack legitimacy, but as a consequence of the work that people have undertaken, it certainly seems like she's plagiarized it from this program and acted through character trait acquisition, and that her narcissism is at the heart of that. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.